All right, so Bismillah, begin again in the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, who's also known as El-Karim, the most generous. And I put some notes, which I'm just going to build upon regarding Dr. Scott's presentation. And so he spoke about the creation of Adam, our father, Adam, peace be upon him. And this is an interesting point here, because the use of the phrase created in his image is also mentioned within the Islamic tradition as well. But what does that mean? Theologians love to try and understand what is meant here by his. And so within the Islamic tradition, it's been traditionally understood that his here refers to a spiritual image within the heart of the human being. That within the heart of the human being there is the capacity to emulate these beautiful names and characteristics of God. So as I mentioned in my last session, there are 99 beautiful names of God. And this is traditionally memorized and learned about within the Islamic tradition. And one of those names, as I said, is El-Karim. One of the greatest scholars of the Islamic tradition, Al-Ghazali, who passed away in 1111. It's an easy date to remember, 1111. He wrote a beautiful book on the names of God. And he made it with a focus that is very unique. How can we emulate these names of God, these characteristics of God within ourselves? How can we truly emulate that image that God has placed within our hearts? Now, for generosity, we can never ever fully emulate God's generosity, because His bounty is without limit. But for the human being, we can give within our means. And this is interesting because within Islamic law, within the fiqh now, the outward, there are certain aspects that we have to give. Like, for example, it's obligatory for Muslims to give 2.5% of their wealth. And if one were to withhold this is a definite sign of miserliness, bukhul, of a spiritual malice, a disease in one's heart. But even on top of that, one should seek to have not the disease, but the virtue which is its opposite, the generosity, the hospitality. Our Reverend Scott spoke earlier also about the guests of Abraham, which is also mentioned within the Islamic tradition, within the Quran. And it's interesting that within both of these narrations, in the biblical text and also in the Quranic text, we see that Prophet Abraham, peace be upon him, hurries to care for his guests. He hurries to get them an animal slaughtered, hurries to inform his wife about the guests, hurries to respond to their needs. And then why is that there? Why is hurry? And it's interesting because in both the biblical text and in the Quranic text, this is followed with the guests of Lot. Because these same angels, after they visit Abraham, peace be upon him, they go to his nephew, Lot. And we see that in that text, Lot tries to provide the same hospitality, but the community does not. And so it gives greater emphasis within both of these stories upon the power and the focus of serving one's guests. It's interesting that in the biblical text, it mentions the exact location as if the reader would know, which is an indication that this is a popular area, which means that likely Abraham, peace be upon him, located his own tent, his own house, in a place where travelers are notably walking by, which means that he put himself out there, that if someone's in need, I want to help them. And this is our prophet Abraham, peace be upon him, being kareem, being generous, caring for others. It's not obligatory for us to set up our house alongside a traveling area and being a little truck stop. But Abraham, peace be upon him, he put himself out there in case anyone traveling by has any need.
Nowadays, of course, we can go to a Holiday Inn or go to another hotel or go to this or that spot. But at that time, a guest was dependent upon the hospitality of those whom he or she met along their journey. So if a person, for example, is going to make their pilgrimage to Mecca on the Hajj, they were dependent upon the people outside this beautiful sanctuary to care for them along their journey. And if a person is traveling for the sake of knowledge or to see someone, they're dependent upon people to care for them along their journey. Now that is different today. We might see someone on the side of the road. We might see someone who is traveling. We might not necessarily think right away, is someone going to care for them? Because it's not necessarily in our framework. But when someone does have a need of us and when we can be hospitable, how kareem, how generous are we being? It is reported that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, "Whoever believes in God and the last day, let him honor his guests and recompense him." And the companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him, they always wanted to know the details. Like, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by recompense? And the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he said, "It is for a day and a night. And as good hospitality is for 3 days. And after that, it's charity." Within the Arab tradition, if someone asked to stay at your house, it was incumbent upon you, by virtue, that you give them 3 days and nights in your home. And there's a funny story that's later shared when Muslims started developing hospitals. There was a man who was very poor, and he went to the hospital faking an illness. And he's there for 1 day, 2. And third, the doctor finally comes over and says, "Okay, you're clear to go. You can go." And the man who's faking an illness, he goes, "Oh, but I'm still sick." He goes, "Charity's 3 days. Find another spot." And so, but even think today, if someone asks to stay over at their place, just the assumption of 3 days. And this is actually an indication and a beautiful proof of how the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, if there was something good, if there's a good practice in a community, he adopted it and encouraged it. So this was actually a custom of the Arabs before the time of Islam even. And even to this day, many Muslims are known for their generosity because of this. There's another story in which a man came to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and he was severely hungry. And he asked the Prophet, is there any, do you have any food? I'm starving. And the Prophet asked his wife, he goes, "Do we have anything?" And she goes, "No, we don't have anything." So he asks around, and none of his family members have any food to share with this man. So finally he calls out to his community and he says, "Is there anyone here that will be a host to a guest of the Messenger of God?" And one person jumps at this, "Yes, me. But give me a sec." This man, the host, he runs home and he tells his wife, he goes, "Do we have anything to eat?" First of all, he doesn't even know, "Do we even have anything to eat?" And she goes, "Yes, we just have a little thing for our kids." And an amazing show of hospitality. Amazing show. He said, "Have the kids play around for a little bit until they get tired and they forget about food, and then put them to bed." If only it was that easy all the time, huh? And then we're going to have our guest over. So after the kids go to bed, they invite the guest of the messenger over. And they have a bowl in front of them, or they have a dish in front of them. And there's actually not enough even for themselves. So when the man enters, they mention that we need to just turn off the light, that we just need to put out the candle. But go ahead and help yourself. And so the guest takes from the dish and is eating and eating. And the two parents, they're pretending to eat, just to not make him feel bad that they've given him everything that they have. The next day, the Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him, sees them. And he says to them, knowing through revelation what it had heard, that God admired what you did for your guests last night. And it's even mentioned in the Quran, which continues to show the nobility of this couple. And they gave food in spite of their love for it, for the love of God. And they continue to feed the poor, the orphan, the captive. This is a high standard of hospitality. And it's not the expectation that every single person, every single one of us, should be at the level of these two hosts who give up everything that they have. But from within the Islamic tradition, how much can we give? And if we're unable to give, what within our heart is withholding our being of people of virtue and people of generosity and people of hospitality? There are a few of you who might be interested in knowing some of the sources from which I'm mentioning some of this. And I love books, and everywhere I go I try to bring one, so I thought I'd just give a couple shout-outs. If you're interested in understanding the Islamic tradition's understanding of the heart, it's like spiritual psychology, there's a book by Imam al-Ghazali called Marvels of the Heart. Marvels of the Heart. And it has a beautiful translation. It's actually translated by a Christian who studied at Hartford Seminary, where I went and studied. And it has a beautiful, beautiful commentary, or a beautiful explanation. And for understanding spiritual diseases of the heart, there's here a translation of a beautiful poem on the spiritual diseases of the heart called Purification of the Heart, translated with commentary by Sheikh Hamza Yusuf. My fellow community members, may God make us all people of generosity and hospitality. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you particularly for the way that second reflection helps us to reflect on how our practices of hospitality and to dream a little bit about what our city could look like if we took hospitality as seriously as our scriptures do. Thank you again.